Okay, well, anyway, it's what's today? January 8th? 7th.
This is Wednesday.
2015.
I'm not sure.
Wednesday, coldest day of the winter, as we sit in front of Art Hinker's fireplace. This, I think, is the 8th or 9th in our sequence of interviews with people who have had a lot to do with the founding of the Western Dubuque District and its ongoing progress. And so at this point, we'll just start a little visit. And Art, maybe we could start out with, even before you were with Western Dubuque, a little background, maybe from college on, if you want to start there. And
well, as far as the Western Dubuque issue, I think I'd prefer to start maybe the 4 years after I graduated from college, because that's when I was teaching and coaching at Xavier in Dyersville, and we would play Western Dubuque. I had played baseball in '56 with Dyersville, so I played Epworth and Piasta and all those teams around, so I'd gotten quite acquainted with many of them, including Ralph Buckman, who was playing for Epworth. And in fact, we played them in the semifinals, I think, in the Dyersville tournament, and Epworth had hired a pitcher, and he didn't show up, so Buck had a pitch, and he just about beat us. I think we beat him 3-2 or something like that in a close ball game. But that was my initial acquaintance with Ralph Buckman. And then I did play for Farley 1 year, just the end of the season. Baseball was finished at Loris, and Farley was playing Epworth, and Buck pitched against me all day. I got a hit and beat him in the 10th inning, so we were off to real good friends. But I'm coaching with Xavier, and here now, the first year that I came to Xavier was '61, and Western Dubuque had started, and so we played Western Dubuque in baseball. And of course, here's the principal of the school, and he's also the baseball coach, and got acquainted with the guy who everybody respected. I can remember Wayne talking a lot about Buck and how they had gotten so very strong in their relationship with each other. But Wayne told the story of he had been selected as superintendent, and he was sitting down with Buck just to say, how can we get this high school off on the right foot? How can we get going? And of course, Buck was very heavily involved with athletics and loved sports. But they made the decision at that time that was going to be a tough road to hoe to get Western Dubuque off on the right foot. And they decided that it would maybe be much easier if they could hire a good band director and do something like that. And that's the route they took, and they searched out, and that's how they found Phil Schmitz,
right,
whose father was the band director, instructor at Xavier in Dyersville, where I was teaching.
Right.
And Buck had been Phil had been up at Colesburg. But that, to me, was probably one of the most significant decisions they could have made, because just look what the man did in getting Western Dubuque off on such a great footing that I don't think would have been possible if they'd have gone another way.
When I talked to Phil, he said that he was actually under contract to Colesburg that first year, and told Wayne that anyway. They were able to work out an agreement with Colesburg where he did halftime up there and halftime at
I didn't even
West
know that.
Dubuque. Well, at that time there was no building.
61 or okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No building. So what he told me was that his assignment was to go around to all of the one-room schoolhouses in the area, and he took along 4 instruments.
Oh, you're kidding me.
And he showed the kids these instruments and played them, and if there was interest, then I asked him about, the cost of the instruments and that sort of thing, and he said, there was two band stores in Dubuque, and at any rate, the one offered an opportunity that the kids could rent the instruments for a while, and if they decided to buy them, they would apply whatever they paid previously for the cost of the instrument.
Okay.
That's how it all started.
And then 61 was the first year you had a building.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first year we were in Dyersville, Xavier.
Okay.
Because I remember we played a baseball game against Western Dubuque at Dyersville. And again, figures aren't going to be exact, I'm afraid, but I think we had like a 4-run lead going into the top of the 7th inning, and Western Dubuque scored 4 runs and tied the ball game. And about that time, a big downpour of rain came, and there wasn't any way we could keep on playing. And it ended up going back to the bottom of the 6th, and Xavier beat Western Dubuque. Buck and I talked about that every once in a while. But, I think what was valuable, going a little bit further even with Ralph, was the fact that he was very well liked in the area. And when he became principal, that was just a plus, because the people who had been going to Epworth High School were automatically going to be with him, and he had enough reputation that it attracted a lot of other people to him.
Yeah.
And, knowing that he was a baseball player didn't hurt any. All those things helped to build that foundation.
So you continued on at Xavier until it became Beckman?
Right, and then I coached Beckman 2 years until 68, and then Ann and I took off for Champaign to get a doctorate degree in the next 2 years. Then when we came back, that's when we were hired by Western Dubuque. And of course, spending all those years with Wayne, I don't know how many days either in the car going someplace or just at lunch, we would talk about the organization of Western Dubuque. In some of the situations, the one-room schoolhouses all had to have meetings, and I'm sure that you've come across that with.
Yeah.
And I think that Laverne Deitmeyer was a big catalyst who went with Wayne to almost all those meetings. In fact, they talk about the one up in the Holy Cross area, which makes sense because they had a good Catholic school system. Most of the people were Catholic, so when they had this meeting, one person showed up to represent the one-room schoolhouse. And it's interesting because we had a one-room schoolhouse on the farm about a half-mile away, which for 1 year, my oldest sister and brother went there, but then they from there went to the Catholic school in Vestana after that. But it was so close.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
first years of education was about a half mile up the road, and continued on like that, and seemed like to me the exchange of information when it wasn't our turn to be with the teacher, you could listen to the other classes having presented their stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of learned from that. So.
Sure. Plus, then all of a sudden, if you'd been older in that setup, you were doing a lot of teaching of those littler kids, and that made you a better person too, because you learned so much from being smart enough to share those things with them.
Yep.
I guess. Wayne always talks about his days as county superintendent. While this organization was going on, he still had the responsibility of evaluating the teachers in the one-room schools. And so many of those teachers then later became Western Dubuque teachers.
Right.
Because they were out of a job, and I remember a lot of those teachers that were just certified 2 years, had 2 years of education, certified, but that carried over. And of course, Liz Lynch was the best one. I don't know the best one, but she's by far the most famous one.
Right.
I don't know if Wayne shared the story with you that he went down to have his evaluation with Liz, and he said, I usually just showed up. I didn't make any appointments or anything. Then I'd stay after school and talk with them a little bit, but got there and the school doors were wide open and nobody around. And he said, I just went back outside, and all of a sudden I heard voices in the distance, and he said I walked to the voices, and they were down by a little lake fishing.
Isn't that great?
Only Liz. It is.
Yeah, that was there was just a unique experience to go to a country school and just you helped carry wood into the feed the fire and clean off the blackboards and all that stuff. That was good. That was a lot of good stuff. So anyway, at some point then you formally interviewed with Wayne and
this would have been the spring of 1971, and I was looking for a job, and I interviewed with Dubuque Community to be a high school counselor. They offered me a job. I interviewed with Wayne, and Wayne was going to create a new position of curriculum director because he said I'm not able to keep up with all this stuff anymore. And that one sounded more interesting, and I interviewed with him in the morning, and that night they had a board meeting. The next day he called me up and he said, "Welcome." That was it. And made that decision right away. So, and that was interesting because we lived in North Cascade Road, which was part of the Dubuque Community School District, and we stayed there for 5 years before I told Ann we've got to move in the district. We've got to get there. And that's when we were already members of Thunder Hills here, and that was in the district, so we made the move. I think it was the best thing we did.
Yeah.
So do that for 27, 28 years.
Yeah. What about you have memories of those early years of your involvement in the district with the teachers, etc.? I mean,
I sure remember the teachers. In fact, I was just thinking about that a couple of days ago, about how many of them were part of the one-room schoolhouse, and I go back to each elementary school, and there had to be 2 or 3 in every one of those schools that were former one-room schoolhouse teachers.
Yeah.
And brought on. And of course Wayne took me around, and we would go to Holy Cross, for example, and we had the little elementary school up there, grades K1 I think it was, or K1-2 probably. And on the way he'd make sure he'd drive past places where there was a one-room schoolhouse. Point them out to us. And we, living at Thunder Hills, always remember the day he took me down the back road on, can't think of the name of the road now, but it's a back road that a lot of people take into town from Thunder Hills rather than going to Highway 20.
Cunningham Road over here?
No, it's the one north from us.
Chesterman.
Yeah. And he said, "See the building over there? There's another one-room school right down the bottom of the flat, right part of that valley,
past the bridge
valley
there?
And there was one right down there, and then that was gone pretty quick, and I'm sure that was something that was sold, but there was always a swing set sitting there for years and years after that. And I often wanted to just stop there and go out to the swing set and just look around and see what was there. Well, they had a stream, they could have gone fishing very easily, but now there's nothing around, and that's true for most of them. I know there's one up close to on old Highway 20.
Oh, between Epworth and Piasta.
Piasta,
there's
there's
kind
still
of a brick one, I think. Yeah.
I think the one is gone now at Bankston. There was one when you turned off of the Farley Holy Cross Road and went towards Bankston. There was a one-room schoolhouse there. I can't remember all of them, but I have a feeling I saw most of them because he just enjoyed showing that.
Yeah.
And what a unique difference, though, for the people of Western Dubuque and of Dubuque County and of Eastern Delaware County to go through that change and make decisions about, do we want to be with Western Dubuque? Is there a better direction to go? And of course, I think most of that territory that had one-room schoolhouses, because most of their kids went to the Catholic school, they weren't real concerned about the issue.
Right.
That they just decided to join with Western Dubuque.
Well, from talking to Wayne and other people, the decision that they made was based on the tax
tax base
base as far as where would be more economical to go with West Dubuque or
Yeah.
West Delaware or Colesburg. That's how they made their decisions.
And at that time, their image of what Western Dubuque was going to be was probably a very small school. But
Yep.
that changed very quickly over time, and all of a sudden we were continuing to build schools.
I talked when I interviewed Don Hermson, and he was just getting out of college at
Okay.
Northern Iowa, and his uncle was Laverne Deitmeyer, and Laverne had told him about the possibility of a driver education position. But Don was telling me that what he remembered was talking to his parents at the time the district was formed, and he said they were told basically that once the bond issue was successful, that the plan was they were going to build a high school, a maximum of 240 students, because that would be more than adequate to take care of whatever needs there were.
Yeah.
And within 5 or 6 years, all of a sudden they were inundated with kids because the parochial schools were closing. So, yeah.
Well, the one-room schoolhouse was closed, Piasta closed, Farley closed, the public school. Epworth kept going for a long time, the elementary school.
Yeah.
But the other schools were... It was... I guess recently I saw a picture of the old buildings, public school buildings in Cascade and Dyersville. And wood buildings, they weren't that much of a structure, but that's where, if there were any kids in those towns that went to public school, that's where they went. And I'm sure that, well, in fact, I remember Galen Thomas, who ended up being a very successful football coach at Loras Academy. He was the superintendent and so on down at Cascade.
Right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was the superintendent at Cascade at the public school. And I don't think that lasted very long, but that's where he got his start.
So, okay, on another direction, about the time that you went with Western Dubuque, is that when you started your officiating?
Yes, it was. It was the same year that I started, because at that same time, Dan Conry came from Upper Iowa, where he was the admissions rep, to Loras College as an admissions rep. And he had called on me at Beckman when I was counselor there from 67 through 69, or 66 through 68, and got to know each other pretty well. And I enjoyed him all the time. Well, now he's at Loras, and he just contacts me and he says, Art, have you ever done any refereeing? And I'm sure I must have talked about basketball and stuff like that. And I said, well, I did down in Champaign, Illinois. I refereed for 2 years because that was the way I could get money to help support the family during those 2 years when I didn't have a job. And he said, well, I've got some jobs up in northeast Iowa that I've got to fulfill. And I lost Stan Jack, who was an Upper Iowa coach, who had moved out of the state, and he said, I'm looking for a partner. And I said, talk with Ann. Sounds interesting. And that was the beginning. First game we did was up in Marmac at that time. It was just McGregor Marquette. And a gym probably half as big as what they should be, but it was still fun. And that was the beginning of 17 years of refereeing with them.
So that was that was basketball. Then you got into football also.
Yeah, I did football, and I had done that at Illinois too. And Terry Harris and Brett Johansson were looking for a fourth member, and so I joined them. And then baseball, of course, Dan Conry had been doing baseball, so he and I started doing baseball too. And football gave up first because I just didn't think I had the background to be a real sharp football coach. And so I gave that up in the early 80s. Baseball about the middle 80s, and then 1988 was the last basketball game. No, wait a minute. Yeah, because then Ted was going to be a sophomore at Western Dubuque, and I didn't want to. I wanted to see him play, and Dan was ready to leave Loras and go to a new job too. So we knew that ahead of time, a year ahead of time, that we were going to get out. So I don't think the Athletic Association knew that that was true, because after we worked the final game that in '88 that spring, we told Rick Wolko that this is our last ball game, and he looked at us and we explained to him what we were doing.
How many state tournaments did you work?
Oh boy, probably 10 in boys, because once we got there, we went down every year. In girls, we didn't start until probably '81, I think. So we'd have had 7 years, maybe 8. I don't know. But then the last 5 straight years, we worked the state championship in boys.
Okay.
And during those same 5 years, we worked for girls' state championships. And so, but that, that sounds great. But at the same time, one of the reasons we worked them, I think we had a good reputation, but I mean, one of the reasons we worked them was because there weren't any Dubuque schools being very successful at the time.
Right.
And as a result,
no conflicts.
somebody from Waterloo might have had a conflict, because Waterloo East was good during those years, and so was Waterloo West. If Marshalltown is in the state tournament, then Randy Bloom and other people can't work. It's that type of thing, and here we were. And nobody, the closest we ever worked a local school would have been Regis of Cedar Rapids and DeWitt, and that was in 3A. But then the last 4 years we worked the big schools, and that's because we worked the Valley games, Mississippi Valley games all the time, and I'm sure that was one of the reasons. And Wayne was so good with me on that, and sometimes I would take vacation a couple hours because I had to leave early.
Yeah.
To go, if I had to go to Des Moines, that was an all-day thing, so that was considered a vacation day for me, and so it worked out. But
that was, I still don't understand how he was able to do this, but the first year I started with West Dubuque was the first year that Dave Wegmans also was hired.
Okay, well, and then I was hired 6 months later.
Yeah, but it so happened that was 1970 that Dave and I played in the same softball team, and we won the state championship in August, and the world tournament was being held in Tulsa.
Okay.
And so here we are. I'm supposedly in charge of these buildings at Dyersville. And it's the first week of school, and so Dave and I decided, well, we'll go in and ask. Well, sure enough, he said, go ahead and go. I'll keep track of things.
Yeah.
But that's the way he was, as far as being generous with his guys that he hired, and I always remembered that because it was.
That's interesting, because Wayne himself played baseball.
Yeah.
Town team baseball for Farley. And when I wrote the book on my baseball career, I was talking to Wayne one day, and he said, Art, I think I got a hit off you one day. And I said, well, I hear that a lot, and I'm sure that a lot of people got hits off me. But so that became part of my search, and I found out it was a game at Monticello in the state tournament, Monticello tournament, and they beat us down there, and Wayne had a hit. He had a sacrifice bunt and stuff like that.
He was playing for Farley?
He was playing for Farley, yeah. Jack Sherman, older. Jack was a classmate of mine at Loris, but I think he'd have been Larry's brother.
Yeah, because I played with Larry.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, but.
So we found the evidence, and I made darn sure I called attention to it in the book. He loved to talk baseball. Only sad to say he was a Dodger fan and I was a Cardinal fan. But
right.
Instead of that,
okay, so you were continuing on with Western Dubuque as curriculum director, and that continued until when?
1991, and that's when
right.
Wayne left, and Harold became superintendent. And
right.
I said, Harold, you got 2 people working in this office, and we need a principal, high school principal. I said, I've always thought about wanting to do that. Why don't I offer that? I'll take the job if you want me to. And then I became high school principal for 4 years. And that, the irony there was the fact that Ted had just graduated too, so I wasn't going to have any of my own kids there.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And so,
Well, that was.
but my approach to the idea of curriculum director was that the teachers themselves were the teachers of their curriculum area, were the experts of their curriculum area for the most part. Methodologies and things like that would be my expertise. So I wasn't going to go in, and I did get in a fight with the English department at Western Dubuque High School because I couldn't see having Shakespeare 3 straight years of sophomore, junior, senior. But you talk about a divine area for English teachers.
So that was your confrontation with Lois. Is that what happened?
Well, it wasn't a confrontation. I mean, we got along real well, but I mean, I knew it wasn't going to get very far. I can't remember the other one. I think it was not uncommon for kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers, second grade teachers, and so on, to always make sure there was an Indian unit, the Native Americans, around Thanksgiving. And as I looked at them, they were all the same. Basically, they were doing this. They were talking about how the Pilgrims came. Indians worked with them, had the first Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And so at Dyersville, that wasn't a problem because that kindergarten, except for a few kids, most of them went on to Xavier, and I did not know what they did at Xavier. But as far as our own kindergartens and first grade and second grade, it was really a repeat.
Yeah.
Somehow they had to and boy, that was tough fighting because they didn't want to give up there. They got them to make differences, try to look at ways of doing it differently so that you can still celebrate Thanksgiving but not cover the same thing and stuff. So, but it was those things. But I've always felt that there's no way that one person can be an expert in the content of curriculum.
Yeah.
That that had to rely on them, and then I would work with helping them if they needed help and stuff like that. But it was my job to look at how things were taught and how we reacted with kids and stuff like that more than anything else. And of course I ran into some interesting situations.
That was that period of time from the late 80s, early 90s was when technology really started to creep into the schools, and as administrators we were involved with that obviously, and how that transmitted into the classroom with the teachers and training, and then I remember talking about the kids as far as keyboarding, and when to get that started. There was a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah.
Justifiably so. And but eventually I remember just dealing with that, and at some point, at this particular point, I forget the exact time, mid-90s was when we made the decision to wire the building at the high school with this total system. And so it
was all hooked up together, so you could communicate and stuff like that.
And to each classroom. And so the challenge was to run that wire to make that happen. And I still remember poor Ted Krager.
Oh, that's right.
It's his job to run the wiring. Well, it was an issue at the high school because when the building was designed, it was designed with all these beautiful laminated oak
beams.
Well, that obstructed, of course, the movement of the wire. So back at that time when this happened, Ted would go into a room and he'd get up on a desk or something, and he'd drill through these beams. Well, you knew he'd been there because he never cleaned up the shavings the next day. You know where Ted's trail was because it was sawdust all over the desk.
The other one I remember a lot of times was your custodian at Epworth from New Vienna or Dyersville.
Oh, Tony?
Tony.
Oh, yes.
And he took his vacation in the fall of the year so he could go out ginseng hunting. And I never understood what that was, but I do now because I've got a daughter-in-law who just planted 50 seeds of ginseng on their property down in Missouri, their retirement home. Because her dad did that every year. He grew up in the woods at the Amanas, where she's from, and he would go ginseng hunting, and he taught his daughters how to do that too. And so she's all fired up because right now their home that they bought in Missouri down near, well, I guess it'd be Lake of the Ozarks. They have virgin timber around their home. Their trees are old trees, beautiful, all hardwood trees. But she was out there. She spent about 3 hours planting those ginseng seeds.
So ginseng is
the root is what's valuable.
Used for
health reasons. Yeah, a lot of. In fact, there was just a question. Where the same program for years and years has gone on, where 3 contestants can't believe the knowledge that they have, and one of the questions was the root of a plant that is more often brought in from foreign countries for health reasons, but we have some of it in the United States, and the answer was ginseng. And she's got to wait 5 years before she can use any of it.
Really?
Yeah. It takes that long to develop, but she is all excited about that. And so, and her sister still goes. She lives in Amanas yet. She goes ginseng hunting every spring, and this year it was $100 an ounce.
Wow.
For roots. You don't find very many of them, but it was very valuable.
Pretty valuable.
Yeah. So.
Well,
it almost has to be virgin timber, and he would do that every fall, and I couldn't figure out what he saw in that, but I understand better now.
Well, that's interesting. You bring up Tony's name because his name has never come up before, but now I remember him so clearly because Tony sort of had a philosophy of thinking he would always give his best, and he did. But he would always rail against the his supervisors, because he would say if a problem came up, he'd say, "I tell them and I tell them and I tell them, they never listen." and his other euphemism was he'd see him in the hallway or visit with him. He'd lean up against the locker. And he'd say, "I can't do it all."
Well, I get a picture of him in my mind.
Oh my God.
Going down the hallway with a broom.
Yeah.
With the big mop type of thing, and cleaning up after class breaks in between. And never was a real fast pace, but he was always out there doing something.
Oh yeah.
He just always.
He was quite the guy.
And then Tom Loker over in Farley.
Yep, Tom,
for years.
Interesting guy.
Yeah, and made the movie scene in Field of Dreams.
Yep.
Because he was a custodian at the building they were using. You still remember that?
Yep, that was.
If you didn't know him, you weren't going to recognize it. But
I think it was '88. I think. That sounds about maybe '87, '88, somewhere in there.
In that area anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of Buck so often right now because he moved to Camdenton after he retired, and that's exactly the location where his son and his wife have bought a home.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're about 14 miles out of town, and virgin timber, but Camdenton is their town.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, Terry is a bus driver right now, part-time for Williamsburg, and he's thinking about contacting the school district at Camdenton and
really
drive bus when they moved in there. Yeah.
Okay.
If he's still able to. because they don't think they'll move for about 4 years. And then she'll be ready to retire.
I was just we had our family in for Christmas the last 2 weekends. Well, this past weekend we had him in, and my granddaughter is a freshman at Central Pella.
Okay.
And at any rate, she's got this boyfriend
Okay.
from Williamsburg.
Oh.
And so I got to meet him. Really nice guy. His family farms. They have a large
Do you
amount of.
remember the last name? Because I'd like to shoot it at Terry.
Yeah, I don't. I can't think of it now. But
Because
maybe
Terry's
a little
very
later.
involved. He drives school bus for athletic events and stuff all the time. He loves it. He
Yeah.
really
Well,
loves it. Okay.
But at any rate,
Someplace we'll get that.
Um,
I look at Western Dubuque though, and there is no doubt in my mind that we had a tremendous leader who saw things and saw the whole picture
yeah.
much better, and which was expected of him. I know that, but he did a tremendous job.
His vision was.
Yeah.
And his political skills.
Yeah.
Were.
Yeah.
I mean, really, really strong. Being able to deal with the parochial interest and make sense out of all that. Wow.
And he, because he came from the area, I think he had a better concept than what a person coming from outside would have had
Yeah.
at that time to deal with. He went through all that timeshare business, or not timeshares, but shared time
Sure time. Yeah,
and
wow.
stuff like that, and he just. But I was at Beckman at the time before they had shared time, the 2 years. And Mike Palmer was the principal.
Right.
And in talking with Mike, he's getting pushed for money, getting pushed for considering shared time. But he said, as far as I'm concerned, it will not happen under my watch, simply because if we can't make it on our own, I don't want to be here. Then as soon as Father Guter came, it was big stuff. And went right away, went to shared time.
Yeah, because I was, of course, involved in all that with the junior high part-time.
Yeah.
And that really worked out pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
From a logistical standpoint, those kids came morning and afternoon, and bing, bing, bang, they're here, they're gone, and whatever. Then we started the high school part of it with the old brothers' quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And
then
did some.
by that time, you had the Farley building too.
Yep.
Well, that school closed though, and you took over the building. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I
But,
can remember those years too.
At any rate, those were interesting times from that standpoint of shared time and all of that, but Wayne was able to work through that. To me, it seemed like it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I think
both
it did.
from the parochial and the public standpoint.
Yeah. It was. Financially, it didn't hurt Western Dubuque at all. In fact, it helped Western Dubuque because Wayne was responsible for coming up with the system of how we counted shared time students.
Oh, is that
for
right?
The state.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was one of the big ones with it, and he was asked to, think through it and came up with a suggestion, and they pretty well bought it for him. So.
Well, they were able to buy that, but they could never buy the concept of the some type of system that would make our busing needs reimbursements for the busing was never fair for our district compared to most of the other districts.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And
your daughter's school, Linmar, is a good example of that. How many buses did they have?
oh yeah,
about 5 or 6.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we sit with
Yeah.
70, 80. It just... No, and they've never bought that part. I can still remember going to Placid, a timeshare program in
Yeah.
that building down there.
Mhm.
And 3 teachers, same way at Cascade. We had teachers in the St. Mary's building. And I still remember Fred Nyers was the custodian there, and he eventually ended up over in regular Cascade Elementary. But Fred and I were pretty good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I always give him a hard time because he just hated it when teachers would rearrange the room. And
Okay.
he said, "Why they can't leave those chairs in rows so I can clean better?" And I'm sure it made more work for him. I don't argue that one bit. But I think Lorraine McAllister was the teacher that did that all to him. And then she went over to Cascade Elementary after when that timeshare closed. She
was a good teacher.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was. Yeah. We had a lot of good teachers in Western Dubuque.
Well, you know, ever so
Considering
often.
the number that we had.
Pardon?
Considering the number of teachers
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
had a lot of great ones.
Every so often, this crosses my memory bank. This involves you when you were at the high school. I think it was after the school year in the summer, and there was always this issue of the perforation of the baseball and softball fields for the games. And this one time, Don Till comes in. Larry's the athletic director, of course,
Okay.
and the baseball coach. And so you're in the office, I'm in my office, and Don's in Larry's office. All of a sudden, there's this yelling and screaming, and there was. I think the issue was the fact that Larry's field had been prepared, but Don's wasn't at the time. And so it's Larry. Larry says, "Let's take this into Art's office."
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? God, that was funny.
I also remember the time when we had the issue with cheerleaders who supposedly weren't being treated right by Larry, and that they had the same uniforms for years and stuff like that. And one mother was really hot to trot. And she said, "If we had Ralph Buckman here now, we wouldn't have this problem." And I quietly said, "But we don't have Ralph Buckman anymore, do we?"
That's funny.
Yeah, and it's so funny when you talk about that because Ron Pitts has no love for Buck.
Oh, I know. I've heard that many times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then others adore him. Just
Yeah. And interesting stuff. You mentioned the cheerleaders and their outfits, and
yeah,
I always remember the football uniforms, and periodically we would buy new uniforms for the varsity
okay,
football team, but yet what apparently didn't seem to be necessary to ever upgrade
for the
the
cheerleaders.
sophomores because
oh,
there was an original set of varsity uniforms that became the sophomores back in the 70s, and that material was made so well that we'd look at it every year and it just looked fine.
yeah,
And I think that stuff lasted over 15 years, where we didn't have to replace the sophomores'
I
uniforms.
can remember when the decision was made to have football, and it was not real well accepted. At that time, there was only one high school, and any Cascade students had to come from there, but we thought that'd be a pull for getting Cascade kids to come up to school, Bernard especially, and it did. It really did.
Yeah.
But I remember the interviews that were conducted were extensive, and finally decided on Jim Kilbreth from Upper Iowa, and came in, did a great job, and all of a sudden he had cancer problems, and
Yep.
boy, then
Yeah, I was there the last my first 2 years were his last two,
Okay.
where he got so bad that he just
Yeah.
tragically couldn't continue.
Yeah, it was sad because I think he did a pretty good job
Yeah,
and knew his stuff, and I think got along with the kids and everything. And then so young, man, that was just
yeah. Then that was an interesting time because when Jim left, of course, we needed the varsity coach, and it came down to Tom Kilberg or George Maurer. And I think that was one of the best decisions I was ever involved in, was hiring Tom Kilberg.
Yeah.
Because he was the man for the job, obviously.
Well, and he was so fantastic for the kids.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Never forget the year. I don't know what year it was when I was principal. I mean, 91, 95, but which one of those years, I don't know. But we had a pep rally. And the team was struggling a little bit, but Tom went out and made his remarks, and they were simple but wonderful. And he came back over, and I said, Tom, if you are having pressure, you can forget about it, because what you do for those kids is so great that I would never consider thinking of another coach.
Right. Yep.
You are the best thing that could have happened to those kids in that program.
I have so many memories of that time, or period of time with Tom, because right after he became hired, it was a period kind of like the mid to late 80s when there was just no talent to be had.
I talked to Dave Clements about that a lot, because Kevin was maybe the only good ball player they had.
And poor Tom, he would struggle through those games, and inevitably you could count on it, because another loss and Tom would be called to Harold's office the last period of the day. And poor Tom had to go in there, and Harold, of course, knows everything about everything.
Yeah.
Would go through the game, and anyway, that went on for for a couple of years.
But boy, then he had some great successes.
But those years too, what happened was that I was athletic director, and we needed to upgrade the facility, the football facility, the field.
Mm-hmm.
It was the original field was laid out and constructed, but it had no crown. And there was always a low spot
in the middle,
in the northeast corner that was wet, and so I could never get any cooperation from Dave Barr at that time to improve it. So Tom and I decided to, I forget the year, but as it turned out, it was okay, because at any rate, at the end of the year, we decided we were going to bring in some fill to work on a crown and improve that. And we did. And so Dave Barr said, I said, we want to do this. He said, well, you can have 5 loads of dirt. And so, as it turned out, 5 loads of dirt was like being in the ocean.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, I got Jerry Onstetter to bring the dirt in. Well, once it was done, it was obvious that it wasn't even close. And Dave Barr apparently had gone to some meeting. He was gone. So I just told Jerry, just keep bringing it. And so we did that. And we sculpted it out, seeded it. It was a perfect weather, November that time. The next year was ready to go. It was beautiful. Yeah. And the other thing was we had no irrigation. And so what that involved was Tom would, in the summer, would come up there by himself.
I can still see him up there.
Stupid hoses around.
Yep.
And, that went on for years. So that was another memory of that.
Yeah, I remember that real well. Then we had to get the track, and that was done very cheaply the first time. Not uncommon, though. I mean, that it was done that way, but it was going to be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, so at any rate, that was a lot of memories of those times. And
man, that same crew ran that football program for quite a few years.
Yes.
Tom and Jerry, and then Larry McCready and Steve Finley, and then Tom Danner.
Yep.
Bob Timmerman always talks about it. He said, I'll never forget playing Tom Danner when I was freshman coach. I was the coach of one team, and that's all we had. We had cut it down to where we were only going to have one team, and a good one, and go from there. And Tom Danner still beat me. Yeah. That was another big win when we got him.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Value. Talk about the value of good people for the kids.
I was I happened to how'd this come about? It came about because of the fact that they had a big story in Al Marshall's 700th victory last week in the Telegraph Herald.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, he remembered he started coaching at Aquin in '68.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was still coaching at St. Joe's back at that time.
Oh, were you?
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And,
yeah, you would be. Yeah.
So I contributed a few of those numbers to
Marshall's record.
Al's total.
Yeah. But boy, he has stood with it. Although I always remember Ted, so I don't even want to say it now. Forget it. Off the record, I will. But he has stuck with it.
Well, I remember every so often that people would be grumbling down a Cascade, about should win more or whatever. But Al hung in there and stayed with it.
Well, when he was with Cascade High School, and he had to play Western Dubuque and play in that same conference, that was going to be difficult for him because he was a 200-member school.
Right.
Versus schools that were 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and it was tough for him to be expected to win. And yet he still won his share, without a doubt. But then all of a sudden they decided that they no longer could compete with Western Dubuque and went to a different conference. My God, I don't know. He probably has lost 2 games a year, probably.
Well, but I think that always burned him in the end in the tournaments.
Yeah, because he's playing too easy a schedule.
Wasn't as strong. So
I can remember Al and I talking about that. He said, I wish that people would realize the value of playing tough competition, because he said, I know my record's not real good, but it makes me tough when we get into the tournaments, and now just the opposite is happening.
Yeah. But that's.
I should contact him too and congratulate him.
I want to go see their new gym sometime.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
I can't imagine trying to figure out where they're going to park the cars.
Yeah. Well, they probably had to take that whole front part and make parking lot out of it. I don't know how else they could do it.
Well, the front part was all building. Maybe.
Yeah, one side.
Yeah.
But the other side, I think, where they had a lot of grass, I think on the
that could be.
north
Maybe
side,
to the north,
probably,
possibly.
Probably all parking lot now, I bet.
But, yeah.
It's kind of ironic. Both high schools have a very similar football facility up on top of the hill.
Yeah.
The wind blows. And
Yep. Yeah, that was. Well, it was. To me, it was. The more difficult part was the track season. I mean, going up there in April, and the wind would just cut through you.
Yeah.
And
cold.
Run those track meets. Oh my God!
I remember with Kendall playing for Mason City, running for Mason City. We went to a track meet early in the year. They were playing at Waverly, and a big meet. It had to be Cedar Falls was there, and so on. There were a lot of schools. And Ann and I got there, and Ann lasted about 3 races, and she said, "I'm going back to the car. It is so cold." And I didn't last all the way through, but I did see her run 3 of the 4 events that she was running because I was just frozen. Oh,
yeah, it was.
Steve was out there working though. Finley. He was.
Well, those guys have worked a lot of meets, I'll tell you.
Yeah. But it was cold. Oh.
Yeah, that was.